Today, coming to the message, we finish up the series we've been on for the last 4 or 5 weeks or so. Last week we looked at the calling as lead prophet being passed from Elijah to Elisha. And today we're going to pick up and look at two of the great stories from Elisha's life. Elisha asked for a double portion of the Spirit of God that Elijah had, which was more about a request to inherit, his ministry. But the chapters that follow in 2 Kings, we see twice as many miracles recorded. We don't know exactly what God did, but he definitely picked up and carried on and saw amazing faithfulness from God in this whole process. And so today we're going to look at just two of those miracles from Elisha's life. And as we look at them, this first one's going to remind us that God isn't just the God of a nation, not just the God of the Jewish people, not just the God of America. He's the God of all nations. He's wanting to see people come to him from every nation. We're going to see that in this story, even in the Old Testament. In the second story, we're going to learn about the miracle that God did and how it teaches us about perspective on who God is and what he's doing. So I want you to open up your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 5. And if you use the Bible app tonight, I set up like a little study thing. You can follow along under events. If you search for events in Hilo, it'll give you kind of the verses we're going to be covering today along with a couple points. If you feel like you're really nerdy into that kind of stuff, you can do that if you want to. If not, paper works. We got it up on the screen also. Before I jump into the first verse, let me give you some background. Naaman is the main character along with Elisha in this story. And Naaman is the commander of the Syrian army, one of the sworn enemies of the northern area of Israel. Okay? They've been at battle off and on. They're kind of the main enemy people of the northern area right now. And the commander of the army's gotten leprosy. And he's a powerful man, maybe second to the king, but he's sick and he's going to die, he realizes, unless he gets this taken care of. And he spent time asking around, and he can't find anyone who can heal him in his country. And some servant girl from Israel, who'd been captured and taken off probably, whispers to him and says, hey, if you were in our country, there's a man of God who can heal you. And so he goes seeking this man of God, a prophet who can cure him of this incurable disease. And he comes with great gifts of silver and gold and clothing and all kinds of stuff to give to whoever can heal him. And that's where we pick up the story in chapter 5 of 2 Kings. Let's read along a bit, and I'll interrupt, and we'll see what this means for us as we're going through here. Verse 9, so Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. He comes with a great group of people, servants. And he stands at the door of Elisha's house. Is he inside the house? No, he's out the door of the house. He's going to call out to Elisha. And he says, shoo. And Elisha sent a messenger to him. Is Elisha coming out of the house? No. Elisha's in the house still. Naaman's outside still with all his people. He sends a messenger and says to him, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. Now, first point, if you read this real quick, you miss the point that, has Naaman even said what he wants yet? No. Does Elisha know what he already wants? Yes. This is a powerful man of God who knows who's at your door and what you want. And he says those words, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. But Naaman was angry, verse 11, and he went away, saying, behold, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Verse 12, are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. Now, a couple background things. The Jordan River is kind of known as a dirty river. It wasn't like this beautiful white ocean that we have. A bunch of you guys were at Pune the last 2 days, and I saw the pictures, and I was jealous. It's not like that water. It's kind of like some rivers I've seen in countries like Nepal and the Philippines and Thailand. It's just kind of this nice brown river. And yes, it's fresh water, but it's not like you think, I'm going to go bathe and feel clean afterwards. And Kiana probably felt that where she was in her area. And this man thinking, man, the rivers up here in my country are cleaner. I could have just washed off down there. And he goes away in a rage. Now, a couple other background things. Naaman was a foreigner. He's not a Jewish. He's not a Hebrew. He's a foreigner, and so that makes him unclean in some ways. He can't come into the temple of God. He's nowhere near the temple in Jerusalem, but he would be unable to go in there because he's unclean as a foreigner. 2, he's really unclean because he's a leper. And the law said anyone who was unclean, sick like that, with a skin disease, was not allowed in the temple. And so he's doubly unclean. He's a man that God would say, if you're not pure, you're not able to come into my presence in this temple. And yet, God would still love on them, but symbolically it was like, I want to show my holiness that people like this cannot come into my presence. And the Israelites had built up this image of who was clean and who was unclean, who was blessed by God and who wasn't by some external things. And yet God was wanting them to see that it was beyond just that too. Okay? So he comes doubly unclean, would not be allowed in the temple at all. And when he comes to Elisha for healing, Elisha instructs him using a certain Hebrew term to go and do a ritual cleansing. It's not like go get some soft soap and run your hand under the sink and you'll be clean. It's basically a ritual cleaning that you would do before you were to go into the temple, before you were to eat a certain kind of meal, because he says wash 7 times. It's a ceremonial cleaning before you go into God. And maybe Naaman misses that. I don't know. We see the number 7 all the time in the Bible, this symbolic number of perfection, purity, 7 days, a lot of things like that. And the Jews would have done this, they would have picked up on it, but for some reason or not, Naaman doesn't get it. He's understandably upset. When I go to visit someone, I bring gifts and I have an easy request, I expect them to come see me, and I expect them to wave their hand over me and do the magic abracadabra and make it all go away. Not just like, oh yeah, go wash a couple times in that dirty river and then you'll be clean. Naaman's upset, and in some ways understandably, because you're expecting something great. You're expecting God to do like this miracle in front of your eyes, and it's a glow and you have this shimmery feeling on your arm, and all of a sudden, boop, or perfect. That's my sound effect. You like that? Yeah, perfect. I practiced that one. No, I didn't. But sometimes the truth is, God asks us to do simple things to bring about a miracle. He asks us to do things that are normal. Like the Jewish people have been like, I do that all the time. Why would he ask him to do that? Elisha asks him to do something he could have done at home, at a cleaner river in his own country. But sometimes God asks us to do simple things to see if we'll be obedient before great things will happen. And this is a principle that applies to our own lives. Many of you probably have requests in your head thinking, I just wish God would do this in my life or get rid of this. And God's saying, you know what? I've got some simple commands in here. Just really want to see you do this first. And I've had to learn that lesson in my life, and I won't recount all of them. But learning to do the simple things, to be faithful in the small things, often leads to the great things to happen. Now pick up the story again here in verse 13. But his servants, Naaman's servants, they came near to him and said, because he's taken off in a rage. He's left the house. He's marching back to his country. They came to him and they said to him, my father, again, it's a sign of honor to Naaman, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? Has he actually said to you, wash and be clean? And they're making, this is the point, to be clean. He's given you a simple command. That's what you asked for. Verse 14, so he, Naaman, went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, Elisha. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. I don't know if that means all his arm hairs went away. I don't know what it means. But it means his flesh was like moy baby skin, pure, awesome, okay? Because we were talking today, my daughters and I, about wrinkly skin. He probably was a man of a certain age. All of a sudden, it is like perfect. It's not like splotchy. It's perfect. They came to him and they said, he said, wash and be clean. Don't miss the moment here, Naaman. Which is something that we do often, We miss that simple thing. And you and I, we all need friends who are going to point out those kind of things to us. We get all in a rage thinking, God, you owe me this one. Or, man, I thought you were going to do it this way in my life, God. And sometimes our friends come back, hey, don't miss the moment here. Like sometimes we get in our rage and we miss those things in our life. And the question again is, will we obey the simple commands of God, believing that greater things will come from them. God wants to do great things through us, but he needs us to just obey those simple things. And it's not a missed point that they said like a child, because it took faith like a child. It took a little child in his home saying, hey, come to God. There's a man who can do great things. And like a child, he has to have faith, and he's given faith. He's given skin new like a child. Amazing story about what Elisha does. And it's neat, though, because God's going to see another side of the story here in a second. Let's pick up the rest of the story, verse 15. Then Naaman, returned to the man of God, Elisha, he and all his company, and he came and he stood before him. Oh, is he out to the door anymore? Naaman's out to the door, and he stood before him. He's probably face to face with Elisha now. And he said, behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. So accept now a present from your servant. But he, Elisha, said, as the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he, Elisha, refused. I'm not taking any gift. We'll come back to that. Then Naaman said, well, if not, please let there be given to your servant 2 mules' loads of earth. For from now on your servant will not offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god but the Lord. And in this matter may the Lord pardon your servant. Here's the matter. When my master, the king of Syria, goes into the house of Rimmon, one of the Baal gods, when I bow myself in that house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter. Elisha, he said to him, go in peace. A couple amazing things there. First off, Elisha has done a great miracle, and yet he receives nothing, no gift. The man came from a foreign country, the enemy of Israel, and he comes saying, hey, I want to give you and I'll bless you. And Elisha says, no. Why do you think he said no? Making you think now, Kyle. What do you think? Why do you think he said no? Come on! We're going to make you preach up here sometime. You got the answer. Come on, what is it? Here's my thoughts. It doesn't tell us literally why not, but here's why. In the beginning, Naaman comes and he thinks, if I find this man, he'll heal me. And Elisha's like, I'm not even going to come face to face with you. I'm going to let God do this. And so when he comes back to reward Elisha, the point's already been made. It's not me. If Elisha were to take payment, it's as if saying, oh yeah, I did the work. Elisha's like, no, I didn't do this. I don't get payment for this. God is the one. If I take payment, I cheapen the miracle. When we put our glory upon a man, it cheapens what God has done. And so he's not going to take any payment for this. And again, we talked last week, Elisha's heart is pure in this. There's not greed in it. He's not going to take payment. And then he makes this weird request about, dirt. This is the other part of that section. What is he taking dirt back for? Well, he's probably going to do, he's going to make an altar. They take the mud, they make it into bricks. He's going to build an altar, probably in the style of this god. It was a culturally relevant way of saying, hey, I can't live here and go to your temple, so I'm going to make something similar in my area where I live so I can worship your God. And it's a culturally relevant way of him doing this. But he also makes this weird request saying, hey, I'm the commander of the Syrian army, and my king, my employer, well, I have to go in with him, and when I go in with him, he's going to go into the temple at least once a year and bow before this fake god, and I have to go in with him. Will God forgive me of this? And Elisha doesn't give him a straight answer, but it seems to be like he says, go in peace. Now that messes with me. What does it mean here behind this? Does it mean, well, whatever your actions are, God doesn't really care if you're bowing down to another god? No, it totally matters. God does not want you bowing down. The book of James makes it clear, not just faith, believing the right things, but doing the right things matter. And the Bible's full of commands for obedience. But God is also, this section tells us, God is merciful in the gray areas. In those areas where you're like, this is kind of awkward, but is God going to be understanding of this? And I think God is. He says God is grace and mercy. He's full of that. Now, does it mean you can go and watch whatever you want and just say, God won't care, it's a gray area? No, if his commands are clear, you shouldn't do this. in this kind of gray area where he's kind of forced because it's my job. I had someone ask me the other day, their employer does these Hawaiian blessings over their work. And sometimes it kind of gets a little awkward. And he's like, am I going to be in trouble with God? And I'm like, where's your heart? He's like, no, I don't believe any of that stuff. And I said, I think this story applies. And you might find that, like probably when Kiana was in her country and you go up to a temple to visit, to see what they're doing, and you have to take your shoes off before you walk in. Is God going to smite me for this? No, I think it's okay. Because your heart is in the right place. That's a weird one. Be careful trying to apply that too far. But God is merciful in the gray areas, I think. Now look at the rest of the section, verse 19, the other part. Now when Naaman had gone from him, Naaman's left for his country from Elisha. Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, see, my master has spared this Naaman the Syrian, in not accepting from his hand what he brought. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something for him. Elisha knows nothing of this. So Gehazi, the servant, followed Naaman. When Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from his chariot to meet him and said, is all well? And he, Gehazi, said, all is well. My master has sent to me. There have now just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothing. Truth or not truth? Not truth. And Naaman said, be pleased to accept 2 talents. Naaman is very giving. He understands kindness. And he urged him, and he tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothing and laid them on his servants. And they carried them before Gehazi. And when they came to the hill, he took them from their hand and put them in the house, and he sent the men away, and they departed. We see the other side of the story. Elisha would not accept any gift to steal away from what God had done. But you see Gehazi on the other side saying, can't let him go away without taking something. This is the enemy. Of course, God's going to, use this for us. I can almost imagine him doing one of those things in my head, like, I'm sure I could use this in some great ways. I mean, God's going to give this to me. It's a gift. And yet, it wasn't. And it took a lie, which is the real revealing this wasn't of God. Gehazi, in greed, or maybe not understanding the point of what's going on with this payments and stealing from God, he chooses to cash in on God's miracle and accept this gift. And look how the story plays out. Verse 25 now. He went in, Gehazi, and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, where have you been, Gehazi? And he said, your servant went nowhere. It's like those lies building upon lies. But he, Elisha, said to him, did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? This is a man of God. You don't lie to him, Gehazi. Remember, he already knew it was happening before the other guy came. Did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Was it a time to accept money and garments, olive orchards and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants? He's basically saying, where's it going to end, Gehazi, this greed that's taken over? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And so he, Gehazi, went out from his presence, a leper like snow. Though all of this happened outside of Elisha's sight, he's shown himself to be a man of God, a powerful prophet. He knows the exact moment the sin happened, when the man got off the chariot and he spoke the lie. And that broke his heart. Did not my heart go? They were together on the same page, but as soon as he broke that, his heart knew it right there. Like I said last week, our goal in life cannot be riches and fame. It's not a time for that. Like Elisha says, this is not a time for that. We can use those. We need food. We need clothing. But it's not a time to chase after those things, because where is it going to end? And once you start chasing after that, it'll consume you. And I tell this to the youth that I always speak to all the time. So listen up. Our society has built up. It's a capitalistic society. We all are built this way. You go to school to get good grades. You get good grades so you can graduate and go to college. You go to college to get a degree. You get a degree so you can get a good job, so you can make lots of. Okay, we're built our whole lives in this pursuit of that. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad, but if you don't recognize where they're trying to lead you in this pursuit, it'll just consume you. Do those things, but for a different end goal. That's my challenge to you guys. Let me pick up the next story, okay? As we kind of move on here. 2 Kings chapter 6, another miracle of Elisha. Now once, when the king of Syria was warring against Israel, okay, so, whoa, things have changed pretty quick. Several years have passed now. Before they weren't at war and Naaman could come and visit and it was all cool. Well, it's not so good anymore. The kings are upset at each other and there's war going on again between Syria and northern Israel. Once the king of Syria was warring against Israel, he took counsel with his servants, saying, "At such and such a place shall be my camp." But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, Elisha, to his king, "Beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are going down there." And the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God had told him, and thus he used to warn him. So they saved him there more than once or twice. The king of Syria is trying to attack Israel and ambush the king of Israel. And Elisha is spoiling it because he knows things. Again, if you're going to be a superhero, the best thing is to know the future. It's the best superpower. It just is. Forget super strength, super speed. If you know the future, you can avoid everybody. Just telling you, if you're going to have a superhero argument, it always wins. He knows what's coming and he's warning the guy ahead of time. And look what happens to the king of Syria when he figures this out. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this thing. And he called his servants and said to him, "Will you not show me who is for us and who's for the king of Israel?" He's like, "Which one of you is spying and passing on what's going on?" And one of his servants said, "None, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel, the words that you speak in your bedroom." That's creepy. Anyway, and he said, "Go and see where he is, that I may send and seize him." It was told, "Behold, he is in Dothan." So he sent there horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. Now this isn't far from the capital of Israel in the north. Just so you know some background, these country areas, northern Israel and Syria, they're right next to each other, and he sends at night to go get to this guy before he comes away. And it's only like 10 miles away from the capital. So Syria is the powerful one here. They're able to penetrate all the way into this country, this small town, to try and capture Elisha. It shows there's great power on the Syrian side at this time. But the king thinks he has the power to capture the prophet of Elisha. And let's see what happens when he comes here. Verse 15, when the servant of the man of God, a different servant, not Gehazi, a new servant of the man of God, Elisha, rose early in the morning, and he went out. Behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" He, Elisha, said, "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then Elisha prayed and said, "O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, the servant, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And when the Syrians came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Please strike this people with blindness." And so he struck them with blindness in accordance with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, "This is not the way. These are not the droids that you were looking for." No, not quite like that, but something like that. This is not the way. You know, they steal everything that's good from the Bible. This is not the way. This is not the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And he led them to Samaria. Remember last Sunday, we talked about Elijah. He goes up to heaven, and what carries him up to heaven? Chariot of fire. We praise that his servant's eyes be open. What does he see all around him? Chariots of fire. It's a repeated symbol of God's power, the army that he has at his command, okay? Not like something new. This is something that's around us. And maybe there are tanks now instead of chariots, but it's a symbolic act of power, okay? God is able to do anything to protect. He's there. And the blindness the Syrian army has here is probably not full blindness, because Elijah's about to lead them to another city. Probably like disorientation, like they don't quite recognize who this person is. He leads them into the capital city. I'm going to finish the story up without reading it, just to close up summary. He leads them into the capital city. They close the gates, and all of a sudden the army wakes up and they realize they're inside the capital city with the rest of the enemy's army surrounding them. And the king says, Elisha, do I get to slaughter them now? And he's like, no, I want you to feed them. And it's like, what? Yeah, I want you to feed them as you would guests. So he does, and he sends them away, and it starts peace in the country once again. There's a lot of good biblical principles there about forgiveness, mercy to your enemies, loving your enemies. We won't get into all those right now. But that's the end of the story. You can read it on your own later if you want to. But I want to come back to this moment where they're in the city. Elisha and his servant are surrounded by this army. The irony of this story, oh no, let me go even further back. So in this story, there's a new servant. Gehazi is gone. He's left Elisha because of his sin. But this servant is still learning who God is and how he works and the power of God through Elisha's mentoring. And Elisha declares that famous line, those who are with us are more than those who are with them, or depending on your translation, greater than those who are with them. God and his army, who are on our side as children of God, are always present. They're always ready to fight, defend for his purposes in our lives. And God doesn't even use them in this story. Like, he could just wiped off the other army. But it was a symbolic act to bring awareness of who he was. And Elisha knows that, and it gives him courage for the battle that he does have ahead, knowing that it's not over. It's a perspective thing here. The irony of this story is that one person sees truly and the other goes blind. You see the two sides of this one? He prays that his servant can see and he sees. He prays that the army go blind and they go blind. This is a reoccurring truth in the scripture, that those who believe in the unseen can really see, and that those who only believe in what they see here on earth are really blind. Repeated over and over by Jesus. Perspective is everything in this story. Perspective on what's in front of you. The Syrian army, they see this small town and this little man, and they think, we've got this, we're going to demolish him. The servant wakes up and he looks up and he sees an army. He's like, what are we going to do, Elisha? We got no options. But Elisha has the proper perspective, and he sees and understands who God is, and he knows that they're not in trouble. And that ultimately was the correct perspective. Not this and not this, but this. And I want to ask you guys tonight, what's your perspective on life right now? Do you feel surrounded by work or by something going on emotionally, by someone who's physically harming you, by someone who's putting you down, by unsure of what's going to happen next? Do you feel like you're surrounded and out of options? Do you have God's perspective on that? The infinite plans that he could have to use you for. A year or two ago, we would have talked to Kiana, and if I had brought her up here on stage and I said, hey, so how do you feel about doing 6 months as a missionary? And she would have laughed at us and probably thought, what? And yet God was faithful to bring her to that place. I don't have this verse up on the screen here today. But God's perspective is so important. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 1:18, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. It's perspective. Some people look at this teachings of the Bible and they think God comes down as a man, and then instead of, just like wiping out all the bad guys, he dies instead? What kind of God is that would come down and die? In fact, a lot of people that I've seen on mission trips, they're like, that's not a very powerful God if he just comes down to earth and then dies. That's kind of silly. It seems foolishness to them. But to those of us who understand the predicament we're in, the love that God has, the sacrifice in his heart, a God who would come down from the mountain, great high in heaven, teach us kindness, and then model it by giving up his life, man, we see the power in that. What's your perspective in life? And we see things differently if the Holy Spirit has opened our eyes. Maybe you need that today. Maybe you came here and you were having some doubts about this whole God thing, or about what he's going to do for your life, or you're not even sure about this whole Jesus and the cross thing, that's kind of weird. How can I know this thing that happened 2,000 years ago actually applies to my life? Tonight, I want to ask that you join me in prayer and say, God, I need new sight. Help me to see the truth about Jesus. Help me to see that your army is present no matter what I'm going through. That you've got a plan even when I can't see it. Maybe you need to see clearer even further back. That tonight, as Kiana spoke about what God's doing in other nations, may God help me to see broader that it's not just about my country and my people, but God is here with a plan for all the nations. Maybe you simply need to believe that he's here for you. But God loves you no matter what you've gone through. He's strong to save in your own life. Maybe like Naaman in the very beginning, you've heard God's story, you believe in it, you simply just need to begin to walk in that and obey what he said. The simple commands that he's asked us to live by. And actually take him at his word and see what he's going to do in your life.